There are people in their 70s who hike mountains on weekends, grow their own food, learn new languages, and have more energy than people half their age. And then there are people in their 60s who struggle to walk up a flight of stairs, rely on others for basic daily tasks, and feel perpetually exhausted by a life that has become genuinely difficult to navigate physically. The gap between these two groups is not primarily explained by luck. It is not explained by genetics alone. It is explained by decades of small choices that accumulated quietly in one direction or another. Aging is often misunderstood as something that happens to you, a passive process that begins around retirement age and involves a predictable, unavoidable decline that is largely outside your control. The science tells a different story. While genetics plays a genuine role in how we age, research consistently shows that lifestyle factors, the texture of ordinary life, have an enormous influence on how your body and brain function as you get older. Not just how you look, how well you move, how clearly you think, how independently you live, and how much you enjoy the decades ahead of you. And perhaps the most important thing to understand before any of this begins. Aging does not start at 60. It starts now, wherever you are, in the choices you are already making. The habits that will define your 70s and 80s are being built in both directions today. Subscribe to Freud Mind and let us get into the science of aging well. The first thing to understand about aging is that it is not a sudden arrival. There is no moment at which the body decides to begin its decline. The process is continuous, gradual, and has been operating since your mid-20s, when certain biological metrics begin their slow, decades-long trajectory. Think of aging like compound interest working in two directions simultaneously. Every good habit you maintain is a daily deposit into an account whose balance will become visible only 30 years from now. Every consistently poor habit is a daily withdrawal from the same account. The goal of aging well is not to stay young forever. That is not possible, and chasing it tends to produce anxiety rather than well-being. The goal is to preserve function for as long as possible, to remain physically capable, mentally sharp, and socially connected well into the decades that most people spend in significant decline. The difference between the person who is hiking at 75 and the person who is housebound at 75 is almost always traceable to choices made in the decades before either of them reached 70. The human body operates on a principle that is as simple as it is unforgiving. Use it or lose it. This applies to almost every system in the body that matters for quality of life. And the most consequential application of this principle for most people is muscle. Muscle mass begins to decline naturally after the mid-30s in a process called sarcopenia, unless it is actively maintained through resistance exercise. The rate of loss is slow enough that most people do not notice it for decades, but the cumulative effect is significant. By the time many people reach their 70s, they may have lost 30 to 40% of the muscle mass they had at 30. This is not an inevitable consequence of aging that cannot be influenced. It is a consequence of aging that is dramatically accelerated by sedentary behavior and significantly slowed by regular movement. Muscle is one of the strongest predictors of independence in later life. Not because it is about looking athletic, but because the functional capacity to get off the floor, carry groceries, maintain balance, climb stairs, and perform the dozens of small physical tasks that independent living requires is entirely dependent on maintaining adequate strength. People who maintain muscle mass and strength into old age are significantly more likely to be living independently, with less pain, and with better quality of life than those who do not. Strength training does not need to be dramatic or extreme to be effective. Resistance exercise 2 to 3 times per week, using body weight, bands, or weights, combined with daily walking, mobility work, and attention to balance, produces results that accumulate meaningfully over years. Balance is particularly important and particularly neglected. Fall-related injuries are among the most serious health events in older adults, and balance ability is something that must be practiced to be maintained. Daily walking is associated in research with reduced mortality risk, better cardiovascular health, improved mood, maintained cognitive function, and better sleep. The people who walk every day for decades are building something that the person who does intense exercise occasionally and is sedentary the rest of the time is not. Every night, while you sleep, your body is doing things it cannot do while you are awake. Cells are repaired. Tissues are rebuilt. The immune system does significant maintenance work. Hormones critical to everything from muscle repair to appetite regulation to stress response are secreted in patterns that depend on adequate quality sleep. And the brain performs a process called glymphatic clearance, essentially a waste removal system that flushes metabolic byproducts, including proteins associated with neurodegenerative disease, from brain tissue. This cleaning process is dramatically less efficient when sleep is shortened or disrupted. Chronic poor sleep is one of the most thoroughly documented accelerators of biological aging. It increases systemic inflammation, impairs immune function, disrupts hormonal regulation, accelerates cellular aging through effects on telomeres, increases cardiovascular risk, and contributes significantly to cognitive decline. People who consistently sleep poorly age faster at the cellular level than those who sleep well. 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night is the consistently recommended range for adults, and both significantly too little and regularly too much appear to be associated with worse health outcomes. Sleep quality matters as much as quantity. Fragmented sleep, sleep in inconsistent patterns, and sleep in environments with light or sound disruption all reduce the restorative value even when total hours seem adequate. The habits that support sleep are simple and well known, but consistently undervalued. Consistent sleep and wake times, limited screen exposure before bed, a cool and dark sleeping environment, limited caffeine after mid-afternoon, and enough physical activity during the day to produce genuine physical tiredness. These are the conditions the body needs for sleep to do its actual biological work. Food is the most discussed topic in the entire health and wellness space. Protein is the nutrient most underconsumed by older adults, despite being among the most important. Muscle maintenance, immune function, tissue repair, and dozens of enzymatic processes in the body depend on adequate protein intake. Many people eat less protein as they age, particularly if appetite decreases, at exactly the time when the body's need for it remains significant, and the consequences of deficiency become more pronounced. Adequate protein, from animal or plant sources spread across the day, is one of the most straightforward dietary investments in healthy aging. Fruits and vegetables are associated with better health outcomes, likely through multiple mechanisms, including fiber, micronutrient delivery, antioxidant activity, and gut microbiome support. The specifics of which fruits and vegetables matter less than simply eating a variety of them, consistently across decades. The gut microbiome, the community of microorganisms in the digestive system, has become a major area of longevity research in recent years. The diversity and health of the gut microbiome is increasingly associated with immune function, inflammation levels, mental health, and metabolic health. Dietary fiber is the primary fuel for a healthy gut microbiome, which means high-fiber foods are not just good for digestion in the immediate sense. They are supporting a system whose function ramifies throughout the body. Ultra-processed foods, products that are manufactured with ingredients rarely found in a kitchen and engineered for palatability and long shelf life, are associated in research with increased inflammation, worse metabolic health, faster biological aging, and higher rates of the chronic diseases that dominate the later years of life for many people. Avoiding them entirely is difficult in modern food environments. Reducing their proportion of the diet consistently over time appears to produce meaningful health benefits. Cognitive decline with aging is real, but it is not uniform or inevitable, and the degree to which the brain maintains its function into old age is significantly influenced by how it has been used throughout life. Neuroplasticity. The brain's capacity to form new neural connections and reorganize existing ones remains active throughout life, though it changes in character with age. The brain continues to be shaped by experience, by challenge, and by learning. People who continue to engage in intellectually stimulating activities throughout their lives, reading, problem-solving, learning new skills, engaging in substantive conversation, pursuing hobbies that require mental effort, show evidence of what researchers call cognitive reserve, a buffer against the neurological changes of aging that allows maintained function even as some biological change occurs. The most important distinction here is the difference between routine and challenge. Doing familiar activities that require no mental adaptation may feel cognitively engaging, but may provide less brain benefit than activities that require learning, adjustment, and the navigation of genuine novelty. Learning a musical instrument in your 50s is more cognitively demanding than listening to music you already know. Learning a new language at 60 is more challenging than reading in a language you already speak fluently. The challenge is the point. Social interaction is one of the most potent and most underappreciated forms of cognitive stimulation available. A genuine conversation, particularly one that requires you to articulate ideas, track another person's perspective, and respond with precision, engages multiple brain systems simultaneously in ways that passive consumption of media simply does not. People who maintain rich social lives into old age consistently show better cognitive outcomes than those who are socially isolated. Of all the things that accelerate aging, chronic stress is among the most pervasive and the least recognized. Not because people are unaware that stress is bad for them, but because the specific biological mechanisms through which chronic stress ages the body are genuinely significant and deserve to be understood properly. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, when chronically elevated, produces a cascade of biological effects that touch almost every system in the body. It impairs immune function, making the body more vulnerable to infection and less able to suppress inflammation. It disrupts sleep architecture, reducing the restorative quality of sleep even when hours are adequate. It elevates blood pressure and contributes to cardiovascular risk. It appears to accelerate cellular aging through effects on telomeres, the protective structures at the ends of chromosomes that shorten with aging and with cellular stress. The problem with chronic stress is that it often feels normal. People living under sustained occupational pressure, relationship difficulty, financial strain, or health anxiety frequently adapt to the experience of stress to the point where they no longer register it as stress. They register it as life. The body, however, continues to respond to it as a sustained threat. Practical stress management is not about eliminating difficult circumstances. It is about maintaining adequate recovery from them. Physical activity, quality sleep, social connection, time in natural environments, practices that promote relaxation of the nervous system, and intentional limitation of news and social media consumption all contribute to recovery from stress. The famous blue zones, regions of the world identified by researcher Dan Buettner, where people reliably live to unusually old age in good health, include Sardinia in Italy, Okinawa in Japan, Nicoya in Costa Rica, Ikaria in Greece, and Loma Linda in California. These communities differ in diet, geography, and cultural background, but share several consistent features. Among them, strong social bonds, a sense of community belonging, regular meaningful interaction with others, and a sense of purpose and identity within a social context. Research examining the health effects of loneliness finds consistently stark results. Chronic loneliness is associated with increased inflammation, higher cortisol levels, disrupted sleep, reduced immune function, accelerated cognitive decline, and significantly increased mortality risk. The effect sizes in some studies are comparable to smoking or physical inactivity. Social connection is not a nice-to-have luxury that sits alongside health. It appears to be a foundational element of it. Meaningful relationships, regular social interaction, having people who know you and care about your well-being, belonging to a community larger than yourself. These are not soft additions to a longevity plan. They are among the most robustly supported factors in living longer and living better. Purpose is perhaps the most unusual entry in a conversation about aging and health, but the evidence for its importance is genuine and consistently found across different research traditions. The Japanese concept of ikigai, roughly translated as a reason for being, the thing that makes you want to get up in the morning, has been proposed as one of the contributing factors to the exceptional longevity of Okinawan residents. Similar concepts appear in the research literature under different names: sense of purpose, meaning, in life, eudaimonic well-being. The consistent finding is that people who feel that their life has direction, meaning, and contribution show better health outcomes across a range of measures and live longer than those who do not. Having goals you're working toward, hobbies that require engagement and skill development, relationships in which you contribute meaningfully to others, a sense of continuing curiosity about the world. These are not just psychologically pleasant. They appear to support the biological systems that maintain health. Purpose gives the brain and body a reason to maintain function. Many of the people who age most visibly well, who are active, engaged, and mentally sharp into their 80s and 90s, do not have dramatically different diets or exercise routines from others. What they often do have is a sense of continuing involvement in something that matters to them. Bones and joints are a practical concern that deserves direct attention. Bone density peaks in the late 20s and early 30s and declines gradually afterward, a process dramatically accelerated by inactivity and slowed by resistance exercise and adequate vitamin D. Osteoporosis, the significant loss of bone density that increases fracture risk, is not inevitable, but it is significantly influenced by decades of activity level and nutritional adequacy. Vitamin D, obtained primarily through sunlight exposure and to a lesser degree through diet, plays a critical role in calcium absorption and bone maintenance. In modern indoor lifestyles, vitamin D insufficiency is common and is associated not only with bone health, but with immune function, mood regulation, and muscle function. Getting outdoor sunlight exposure regularly serves multiple aging-related purposes simultaneously. The world's blue zone populations share features that, when assembled together, form a remarkably coherent picture of what aging well looks like in practice. They move naturally throughout their daily lives, rather than delegating all effort to technology and then attempting to compensate with structured exercise. They eat mostly whole foods, primarily plants, and stop eating before they are full. They have consistent purpose, a reason to be here that extends beyond their own comfort. They maintain strong social bonds with family and community. They manage stress through prayer, meditation, rest, or community practices that are embedded in daily life rather than treated as an addition to it. They have faith in one form or another, a sense of belonging to something larger than themselves. What the Blue Zone research suggests is that longevity is not achieved through extraordinary individual discipline applied to a single domain. It emerges from an ordinary way of living that happens to support health across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Smoking is the most thoroughly documented accelerator of biological aging available. It damages blood vessels, impairs lung function, increases cancer risk across multiple sites, and produces measurable acceleration of cellular aging. Excessive alcohol consumption impairs sleep quality, even when it seems to aid sleep onset, damages the liver, increases inflammation, and produces cognitive effects that accumulate over time. Constant sitting, the sedentary behavior that characterizes most modern office work and leisure time, is independently associated with worse health outcomes even in people who exercise regularly. Chronic sleep deprivation produces effects on biological aging that are visible at the cellular level. Long-term unmanaged stress ages the cardiovascular system, the immune system, and the brain. Too little physical activity. The baseline condition of the majority of people in modern developed societies is one of the largest single risk factors for virtually every chronic disease associated with aging. Nobody stops aging. The biology is real. The trajectory is real. And the goal of this entire conversation has never been to suggest otherwise. What is true, and what the research supports with considerable consistency, is that the experience of aging, the rate at which function declines, the degree to which your 70s and 80s are characterized by capability and engagement versus dependency and struggle, is profoundly shaped by habits that are largely within your control. Biological age and chronological age are not the same thing. People of the same calendar age can differ by decades in the functional state of their cardiovascular system, their muscle mass, their cognitive performance, their inflammatory markers, and their overall health. The difference between them is not primarily genetics. It is the accumulated consequence of daily choices made across the decades they have been living. The habits that shape your old age do not begin when you retire. They begin with the choices you make today. Every walk you take, every night of adequate sleep, every meal that nourishes rather than merely fills, every conversation that stretches your thinking, every relationship you invest in, every moment of purpose pursued. These are not just good things to do right now. They are investments in the specific person you will become in 20, 30, 40 years. Small investments made consistently. Building something you will not see the full value of for decades, but building it nonetheless, every single day, whether you intend to or not. The question is just which direction your habits are building in. Like and subscribe to Freud Mind for more. If you found this useful, share it with someone who needs to hear it.